Section 1. You will hear two flatmates, Tom and Richard, talking about their new flatmate who has just moved in the week before. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hi, Richard. I'm glad I caught you here. Can I just talk to you about something? Our new flatmate, Anders, is not quite what I had hoped. I was wondering if you shared my concerns about some of his behaviour.
The new tenant's name is Anders, so Anders has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hi, Richard. I'm glad I caught you here. Can I just talk to you about something? Our new flatmate, Anders, is not quite what I had hoped. I was wondering if you shared my concerns about some of his behaviour.
Yes, Tom, I know what you mean, but we can't be entirely negative. He has good points. I mean, at least he's quiet. He doesn't play loud music all night or bother others or turn his TV up, disturbing everyone.
Sure, he's quiet, but remember our last flatmate? He'd say hi to you and smile and treat everyone politely. In comparison, this new guy is very impolite. He just grunts in reply and sometimes ignores me altogether.
I guess that's just his way. You know, just his character. I don't think he realises he's being impolite, and it shouldn't matter to us too much. We can just ignore him too and quietly live our own lives.
But his friends are hard to ignore when they visit.
I know what you mean, but how often does that happen? I rarely see them, maybe once or twice a month. If they came more often, it might be a problem, but as it is, such rare visits don't matter so much. Wouldn't you say so?
Well, I'm not sure, since it's very obvious when they're here because of all the cigarette smoke in the house. It stinks up the place, and you know we don't allow smoking on the premises.
Well, I've never seen them doing this. Maybe they do it outside. Perhaps we can talk to Anders about it. Always remember, though, in one respect, he's a good tenant. And it's the most important aspect. The previous flatmate would always pay the rent late.
I know what you're going to say. This guy pays promptly. But there's more to being a good tenant than prompt payment. I mean, you need to turn off the TV, clean up your dishes, dress respectably, be polite, and so on. I guess what I'm saying is that basically you need to cooperate with the others, and this new guy fails significantly in this respect.
Okay, I suppose you have a point there.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
I tell you what, Tom, why don't we talk to our new flatmate, Anders, about these issues? If we throw him out, we'll have to go to all the trouble of finding another flatmate, who might not necessarily be much better. So, let's give the current guy a chance. Here, I've got a piece of paper, so let's make a short list of issues to discuss with him. Get it out into the open.
Sure, we'll give him one more chance. So, write communication, and let's tell him to...
Well, we can't change a person's personality overnight. So why don't we have a weekly tenants meeting, and we can just ask him to attend. That way, we can get to know him better. I'll write attend meeting, and we can take it from there.
OK, but we have to tell him about his friends. They can't just do whatever they want. Write a heading friends, and then write don't smoke anywhere, inside or outside.
Well, instead of being so direct and possibly causing offence, I'll just write follow rules, and verbally mention the rules. TV off by 10 p.m, no loud music or bad behaviour, including smoking.
OK, do that, but I still think we need to specifically mention that last issue. You know how I can't stand the habit. So I'd like this to be another and separate point. Cigarettes, strictly forbidden. And it's important to include the strictly here. We can't pussyfoot around too much. Sometimes directness is necessary.
OK, I'll write that. Forbidden. OK. And what about cleaning duties? Anders is a little too relaxed about that. Dishes are sometimes not washed, dirty teacups are left around the place, and so on.
So, right, must do better.
Yeah, again, Tom, he might take that personally and it could cause a scene. I'd rather be general. I'll write must be done and I'll tell him that that's for everyone, not just him. OK?
OK, as long as he gets the message.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear the director of a Language Centre library explaining about its facilities to some new students. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
Welcome to the library, or the ILC, which means Independent Learning Centre, and let me explain about some of its facilities. We're standing here at the entry gates next to the borrowing desk. That's where you check out any books, but you are also advised to study in the library here, since most of our material cannot be borrowed. Thus, we have seating along the middle of the library, and in that far corner in front of us on the left, we have the quiet reading section for some serious reading activity. We used to have the computers there, but then realised that that corner was very quiet and thus better suited for the purpose it now has. The computers were instead shifted to a more central location, right beside us here on the left. Again, somewhat confusingly, this area once housed the newspaper and magazine section, but the people in the quiet reading area had to walk too far to collect this literature, so it was moved to right beside them in the adjacent corner. So, feel free to read the newspapers there, but the reference books, those huge weighty dictionaries, atlases and encyclopedias, were all situated at the opposite end of the building, against the wall. This was because they weren't generally that popular, and we wanted more space for the magazine racks, always a favourite with readers. OK, as well as reading, you need to work on your listening skills, and for that you need the audio section. Again, such an activity needs a quiet area, so we put this in the last remaining corner up there on your right. As you can see, there are CD players and headphones, so just borrow the listening packs, sit down there and listen away. Right, that just leaves the main library. In other libraries, that's often right beside the newspaper and magazine section, allowing freedom to choose from all genres of literature, but here we've got them further apart. For the main library, just follow your nose past the central seating there, and it's there among all that shelving, upon which you'll find an abundance of interesting books and listening packs to use.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
Now, I'd like to tell you a bit more about an excellent service offered in the ILC here that we call the Special Sessions. What can you do in them? For a start, many of you need practice in speaking English, and for that we hold a special discussion session, led by a teacher. That can be noisy. In fact, we hope that it is noisy, since that would mean many people are talking. It's in the central seating area, and it used to be from 10:30 to 1:30, but we found that the noise was disturbing the regular ILC patrons, so we shortened and moved this discussion to the morning 9 a.m. time slot, when fewer people are in the centre. It goes for 1.5 hours. All right, what about writing skills? Well, we can help you there with another teacher. Now, writing is a fairly quiet activity, so that teacher stations him or herself in the quiet reading area from 1:30 until 3. The 10:30 to midday time slot cannot have a teacher for such writing skills, as they are all teaching in the morning. For this reason, of course, there cannot be an on-call teacher in the morning either. Although many people would like one, particularly the 10:30 to noon crowd, having just finished their early morning class. These students all have to wait until midday onwards, when, for 3 hours, a teacher will be stationed in the audio section, ready to deal with all those questions. Until recently, we had another teacher doing the 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. time slot in the central seating, but all the noise interfered with the late users of the ILC, so we had to cancel that. Also noisy can be the language exchange, where local students who want to learn your language will help you practice English. This is generally done in pairs, so the noise level is low enough not to need this exchange to run at 9 a.m, but at the more congenial time of 10:30 among the central seating. That must finish by 1:30 though, after which quieter and more individual activities take place.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3.
Section 3. You will hear a student called Bobby talking to his tutor about the research project. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 23. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 23.
Hi, Bobby. Go ahead and sit down. Tell me about your research project.
Well, I decided to research football and keys for success on a football team.
That sounds great. What are the guidelines for the test? Did the teacher talk to you about it in class?
No, everything is on a handout that was passed out. It says that the first draft is due at the end of next week and the second and third are due later on in the month. I don't understand why we have to keep revising and fixing it. Is this assignment really that important?
Well, this project is a major requirement for passing 11th grade English and will go on your permanent record.
Oh, really? Does that mean it will affect what English level I am placed in next year?
Well, not exactly. You need a good grade to move on, but it is your overall grade and teacher recommendation that determines what level of English you are placed in next year. Anyway, tell me about your topic choice. Do you play football?
Well, actually, it's because my father loves the sport. He watches it every weekend.
Cool. It's a good idea to report on something you're interested in.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 24 to 30. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 24 to 30.
I see you worked hard calling players and the head coach to talk, so let's see what information you got.
Well, you have to listen carefully to the first call on the recording. It's really hard to hear because the background noise is louder than the person's voice.
Yes, it is a bit tough to discern. I'm afraid the player's answer is too short as well. You will have to interview him again and try to get him to give a better answer.
Okay, I thought that might happen. I will call him again tomorrow.
Moving on, let's look back at this question. You asked, "Tell me about a time when you learned a major life lesson through playing football and explain how that has shaped the person and player you have become now, and how you hope to pass on that lesson." It is a great idea for a question, but in an oral interview it is far too complex. I would advise you to break it up into multiple parts to get a better response.
I guess you're right. I wouldn't want to have to provide an answer to a question like that. I will simplify it. I found that when I asked players this question, it took too much time because they were struggling to answer the question completely. In fact, this is the question Joe Billings was answering when the tape ran out.
He did tend to ramble on all the questions, didn't he?
He sure did.
I would recommend that when you go back and interview players again, that you use a more sophisticated recording device. This recording is spotty, which indicates that the equipment wasn't working consistently.
Okay, I guess it probably wasn't the best idea to use the sound recorder on my phone. Hey, could you give me some feedback on the content of the report itself?
Sure. Let's start by focusing on your topic. While I like that you chose to cover football, it seems inexplicit. The keys for success of a player and team is quite an interesting topic, but what is your thesis? That is to say, what conclusions can you draw from your research? I would suggest coming up with a strong thesis statement and then shaping your report based on that.
Is it really too vague? I put a whole lot of facts into it. I list the top 10 goal scorers in football history and later on provide statistics for a few of the most famous coaches and their records as coaches.
I think that's great that you included these facts, but I think you focus too much on the facts and not enough on connecting these facts to make your point.
Ah, I see. Okay. So it looks like I have quite a bit of work to do before the deadline.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture about urban migration. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon, and welcome to my talk on urban migration today. The world has experienced unprecedented urban growth in the recent decades. As much as 3% of Earth's landmass has been urbanized, an increase of at least 50% over previous estimates. Today, people living in cities already outnumber those in rural areas, and the trend does not appear to be reversing. In addition, cities have larger amounts of carbon consumption than rural areas. This is a result from two major aspects. First, with the increase of urban population around the world, the massive construction of urban infrastructure and residential housing is hard to avoid. Second, urban households have a higher rate of car ownership and use more gasoline products. Even though rural exodus is often negatively judged, there are also benefits of migration shared by the local environment and the society as a whole. Well, firstly, global trends of increasing urban migration and population urbanization can provide opportunities for nature conservations, particularly in regions where deforestation is driven by agriculture. As rural dwellers leave their homes, local forests are left to recover. What's more, it is easier for city dwellers to get around. Living in the country means transport can be very difficult. For instance, after midnight there are no buses or taxis in the countryside. However, there is still a number of public transport modes to choose from in the city. Finally, with more funds and advanced technology, cities endeavor to produce clean energy. New power plants have been built to take harmful methane gas created by the decomposition of rubbish and convert it into electricity. By doing so, an important greenhouse gas is turned into useful energy rather than being directly emitted into the atmosphere. The hustle and bustle of city life offers women the opportunity to explore different professions and pursue their own careers. Women in cities work as engineers, managers, and even football players. This change of roles has affected their marital status and family life. More women are choosing their careers over marriage, which raises the graph of late marriages. As a result, more are remaining single well into their late 30s. They want to be independent and earn money on their own. It is also easier for them to get a promotion while working in the city. Women are slowly achieving wider participation at work, while in rural areas the mindset is still very conservative. However, cities also change the way that humans interact with each other and the environment, often causing multiple problems. In general, urban wages are significantly higher, so moving to the city is an opportunity to earn what was impossible in rural areas. However, the wage difference is often offset by the higher cost of living and absence of self-produced goods, including subsistence farming. A sizable proportion of new corners attach greater importance to money and gradually abandon their former way of life, thus risking losing their culture. These new city residents are also faced with another problem. According to statistics, crime rates are significantly higher in densely populated urban regions than in rural areas. For instance, property crime rates in our metropolitan areas are 3 to 4 times as high in comparison to the rates in rural communities. Immigrants, upon arrival into cities, typically move into the poor, blighted neighborhoods because that is where they can afford to live. Crime in these areas is high and reflects poor living conditions, as these neighborhoods experience great levels of poverty. This pattern also occurs for violent crimes, which is much more common in large urban areas than elsewhere. In addition, traffic congestion and industrial manufacturing are prominent features of the urban landscape, which take their toll on the natural environment and those who depend on it. Air pollution from both cars and factory emissions affect the health of countless urban residents. Rural to urban migration can boost the urban economy. With a better economy, cities provide their residents with better welfare, but the concentration of services and facilities such as education, health, and technology in urban areas inevitably contributes to greater energy consumption. Another problem with life in the city is traffic congestion. It makes people late to work and thus stresses us out before we even get there. Deliveries can't arrive on time, gas costs money. The quality of life of those commuters starts to decline. What's worse is that if congestion makes it harder to match the right workers to the best jobs, it is economically inefficient as well.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test.